The ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is over. Early this morning, Israeli warplanes began striking Hamas targets inside Gaza.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blamed the attacks on Hamas' refusal to release more hostages. Now the terror group is making new threats against the captives in Gaza. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
The attacks lit up the night sky over Gaza with dozens of explosions. Israel says it's killed a number of Hamas leaders. Hamas claims hundreds of Gazans have been killed and wounded. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave the order overnight, stating the aim is to achieve the war's objectives, including the release of all of our hostages, both the living and the fallen. The cabinet approved the decision after Hamas repeatedly refused to release the hostages and rejected proposals presented by President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and other mediators.
What we have seen them do is prepare for a terror attack against our troops in Gaza, but more importantly, against our civilians in the communities outside of Gaza and the Western Negev. What we did is we took a preemptive strike on those terrorists, specifically those commanders, and on terror targets, removing those threats, and basically saying we will not accept this.
President Trump was informed of the plan beforehand.
The Trump administration and the White House were consulted by the Israelis on their attacks in Gaza tonight. And as President Trump has made it clear, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel, but also the United States of America, will see a price to pay.
Israel's new chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, oversaw the operations alongside the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. Earlier in the week, Netanyahu announced he plans to fire Bar, the head of the nation's most powerful intelligence agency, over internal disagreements. That would be unprecedented in Israel's history. The attacks now dramatically change the situation between Israel and Hamas after several weeks of ceasefire and negotiations. The two sides' bottom-line demands are contradictory. Israel insists the war can't permanently end till Hamas frees the hostages, disarms, and gives up governing Gaza. Hamas refuses to lay its arms and give up power. It says it won't release the hostages till Israel ends the war and withdraws its troops. Hamas is now issuing threats against the captives, saying in a statement that ending the ceasefire is, quote, exposing the hostages in Gaza to an unknown fate. However, the hostages are Hamas's only real bargaining chip, and if they're all killed, there'll be nothing left to keep the IDF from going all out to destroy the terror group. All this comes as the U.S. continues strikes at Houthi targets in Yemen to end their attacks on shipping in the region.
Today, the operation continues, and it will continue in the coming days until we achieve the president's objectives.
President Trump is now giving Iran, the Houthis' main sponsor, a tough warning. He posted on Truth Social, every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot being fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. And Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danona, is here with us now for more on this story. So what was the breaking point? There have been weeks of peace in Gaza and now the overnight attack. What triggered it?
Thank you for having me here, Gordon. So we had a ceasefire. We were willing to extend the ceasefire. It ended about 3 weeks ago, and we tried to negotiate an extension. We waited and we waited and we waited. Once we saw that Hamas is not willing to continue with the agreement that they will release hostages and we will continue with the ceasefire, we resumed our attacks against Hamas targets in Gaza. And I hope that they got the message. If they didn't understand what happened last night in Israel, they will feel the might of the IDF more. But if they are willing to continue now to negotiate, to release hostages, there will be ceasefire in Gaza.
Well, the attacks seem to be targeted at the leadership. How successful were they?
So we are still waiting for confirmations, but they were caught by surprise. You know, part of the ceasefire, we were not allowed to gather information in Gaza with our surveillance systems. But once it's over, we're watching them. We know what they are doing. Now they are hiding in the tunnels, and they have to realize if they want to get out of the tunnels, they will have to allow the hostages to get out. We have 59 hostages still in captivity. We assume that half of them are still alive. And we know that the physical situation is worsening. So we hope that they will get the message.
Do you have intelligence of where the hostages are? Can you get tunnel locations for them?
Well, I cannot elaborate. You know, in some cases we do know, but you know, the question is if we can go there and get them alive. In the past, we had few successful operations. We brought a few hostages back, but it's very hard to go into the tunnels and guarantee the safety of the hostages.
Right, they would be subject to execution, and you've definitely seen that. The situation is absolutely horrific. There seems to be an anticipation, at least I have anticipation, that somehow the UN is going to react to this and react very negatively. Well, what do you anticipate happening there?
Well, I have zero expectations from the United Nations, and I said it very clearly. We will do what is right for the people of Israel. You know, I came back to the UN to the same position I held a few years ago because of the situation in Israel. And I expected to hear a condemnation for the atrocities of October 7th. Until today, almost 18 months, we haven't seen one resolution condemning the atrocities, not in the Security Council, nor in the General Assembly. How shameful it can be that this institution, which was established after the Holocaust, witnessed this massacre, and it's quiet. No one is saying anything. So they will attack us. You know, only this week they will have 3 debates in the Security Council regarding the situation in Israel. And my message is very clear. They can meet every day, but we will continue to fight until we bring back our boys and girls back home.
Well, why is it? Why has the UN literally become so pro-Hamas and pro-Hezbollah? It just doesn't make any sense that an international group designed to produce world peace would now support terrorist organizations. What caused that?
Well, you can go back, you know, to the 70s when you saw that the UN started to adopt ridiculous resolutions against Israel, and also the structure of the UN. The fact that one country can veto a resolution in the Security Council. So today, if I will propose a resolution condemning Hamas, it will be either China or Russia that will veto that resolution. That's not acceptable. When you have such kind of atrocities all around the world, the UN should stand with the moral values. They are not doing it.
What's their strategic advantage for doing that? Are they looking for oil supplies? Or are they looking for some kind of political influence in the Middle East? What's their end game for doing that?
Well, you know, they are aligned with Iran. And for them, you know, they want to make sure that they get the support of some of those countries for other things. But, you know, they should know better, you know, because those radicals are not threatening only Israel. It's not a threat only to the Jewish people. They're threatening Christianity. They're threatening the American people. They're threatening European countries. And, you know, I was surprised. I speak with many Muslim ambassadors in the UN, and they tell me quietly, they tell me, Danny, what we saw in Gaza with Hamas, that's not our religion. That's not Islam. Don't be mistaken. We condemn it. We are afraid of those radicals. So I think the majority of the Muslims around the world condemn the atrocities of October 7th, but they are not strong enough to say it publicly.
Well, they're saying it very publicly in the mosques of the West Bank. And when they speak in Arabic, they're literally praying to Allah to number the Jews and to annihilate them. Why such a big theological difference between the Muslim countries?
You know, it's interesting because when you look at the Middle East, you understand that we are there to stay. We are not going anywhere. And still you see the incitement coming from the radicals. And I think for some leaders, it's easier for them to incite against Israel rather than to deal with the core issues of economy, education, leadership. So it's easier. It's easier to incite and to blame Israel. But they have to deal with their own issues. They have to spend more funds for their own future. Look at Iran, for example. Today, People are suffering in Iran. They don't have electricity, they don't have food, because the regime is spending the money on the proxies, on the Houthis, on those pirates who attack US vessels. So, we are there, we are fighting the war of the US, the war of Western societies, but we have to understand that we have to tackle those radicals.
Well, let's turn to the Houthis, and the U.S. is striking them very strongly now. Under the Biden administration, I didn't understand why they gave them a pass. They took them off the terrorist list. And then we hear from U.S. naval commanders, this is the most warfare our U.S. Navy has seen since World War II. So you have that level of attack, and there's no corresponding response to the Houthis and going after their supply. From an Israel standpoint, I would assume you think, well, it's about time you responded, but what's the Israeli reaction?
Well, I think President Trump said it very clearly. The Houthis are controlled by Iran. They're being used by Iran, they're being supplied by Iran, and I think you have to tackle the threat. We attacked in Yemen in the past, but I think it shouldn't be only Israel. It should be the US and other countries, because what you have today, you have pirates that are attacking US vessels, US soldiers. You cannot ignore it, because if you will ignore it, you will find the Houthis UAVs attacking the shores of Virginia, of Miami and New York City. It might sound, crazy now, but I can tell you that they have the technology, they have the weapons. Today they have ballistic missiles that can attack Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It's only a matter of time that they will develop the UAVs and the ballistic missiles that can reach the coast of the US. So I think that what President Trump is doing, that is the right approach. If you don't stop attacking US vessels and influencing the trade, we will stop you.
Do you think we're headed for war with Iran?
I think we have to stop Iran. You can do it with sanctions, or you can do it with military power, but you cannot allow them to continue. History have taught us, and this year we mark the 80th year for the liberation of Auschwitz, and we saw what a radical regime can do. And we better believe the Iranians. And history have taught us that you have to stop those regimes before they actually implement their crazy ideas. So we have to block them, and we can do it either with strong economical force, and if it's not working, then we will have to use other means.
What hope do you see for the UN? Is there anything that can change that? It seems to be so anti-Israel. And it also seems to be remarkably anti-Western civilization in a broader context. What hope is there for that institution, which was founded to establish peace, to actually turn back to their roots?
So I think the UN is still an important organization. The fact that you have leaders from around the world in the same building, negotiating, arguing, it's meaningful. But you have to reform the UN. And I believe that the arrival of a US ambassador-elect, Ali Stefanik, to the UN very soon will help us to reform the UN. The US is giving a lot of funds to the UN, and I'm sure that the new administration will make sure that those funds are used to the right purposes, not to incitement, not to promote hatred, but actually to support those who are in need.
Well, Ambassador, thank you very much for your insight. Thank you for being with us on the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll continue to pray for you as you're in the lion's den. You wrote a wonderful book about being there. And we'll continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Thank you, and thank you for all those who support and pray for us. Thank you.